Um, but nevertheless, you don't really need that because the little bit that you eat is going to be blessed. We find this. We just passed Lag BaOmer. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son flee to a cave, right, for 12 years, and then another year, 13 years. The Talmud it speaks about at length in Tractate Shabbos on folio 32. And over there as well, they had a carob tree grew for them miraculously, and they had a stream of water, and that nourished them all those years. They were living above and beyond nature. There's a lower degree where a person, for example, Rabbi Pam says in last week's Torah portion, the Torah speaks about Shemitah, right? So Shemitah is a sabbatical. Every 7 years, the entire Jewish people, the entire land of Israel, they all do not work the fields. They don't work the fields. Anyone could go in, right? Now, if you think about it, this is for the economy of the country. You can imagine what kind of stress that would be. But God is saying, listen, have faith, right? There's no other example like that in history, most likely, than the Jewish people keeping Shemitah, keeping the sabbatical. Because the whole year, the whole country is just laying idle, right? We spoke last week. It was the opportunity for them to grow spiritually, that every layman, it was for the layman that to spend a year engrossed in Torah study, engrossed in spirituality, right? But it's also an idea of faith, just like the weekly Shabbos that comes every week. The Shemitah was a similar idea. So, but Rabbi Pam says an interesting point. Rabbi Pam says that if you look in Parshas Bahar, last week it says, if you're going to ask, God is sort of like, he's the premise he's giving. 1 second, God, I'm not going to work for a whole year in my field. I'm going to be missing out. I'm gonna be down. Rashi makes a calculation. I'm gonna be down more than a year because next year it's gonna affect the year after. It's gonna be 3 years till I could get back on the horse back on to the schedule. So says the Torah, if you're gonna ask what's gonna be, says the Torah, God will command the blessing and you'll have a lot of food. You'll have a plentiful. Rabbi Pamlo says something fascinating. He says that is in contrast to this week's portion where Ochel kima umisparach b'meah, where you're going to eat a little bit and it's going to satisfy you, it's going to nourish you, you're going to get all the nutrients you need from it, you're going to be totally fulfilled by it. He says that last week, the last week's portion is if the person's going to ask, meaning you're shaky, you're a bit shaky. I'm God, how is this going to work for me? I'm nervous. So still they're asking, and they're still going to keep Shemitah. So that still is a level and a high level of faith in God. So God says, you know what? I'm going to take care of you. But there, you're not going to get this blessing because you're nervous, you're concerned. So God always goes measure for measure how we act. That's how he acts with us. So you'll get the blessing, but it's going to be a different blessing. It's going to be a blessing where you're going to have to have a lot of food, and you'll have to eat. You'll have a breakfast, you'll have a lunch, you'll have a supper, right? But it's going to be within the realm of nature. Over here in Bechukotai Telechu is talking about a higher level where a little bit is going to go a tremendous way. Okay, and he says a similar idea. Says the Chassam Sofer. What does it mean, your reign in our portion? He says, Venira diesh bei meaning geshaman. There are two types of rain. Kedisa v'parakama detinus, as in Tractate Tinus, the Talmud tells us. The Hashemayim v'aretz dugmas zachar nekeva. If you look in the first chapter of Tinus, heaven and earth is a mashal. It's an analogy to a man and a woman, a male and a female, a husband and a wife. What is it? Tehamater marvias haaretz utzmicha. The rain we find in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the verse, we find that rain, matar, which is rain, impregnates the land. Umatzmicha, and then things grow. V'hainu, hamatar hativi. He says rain by nature, the way God created, is haroi lefi maimed b'tuchunas haaretz hahi. The way that God set and made the structure in nature is that it should impregnate, so to speak. It should make the land fertile, and it should the land will grow. Will have its produce. There's another type of rain that God is coming through divine providence, and in order of this one side, like this one righteous person, it's Hashem on his merit brings the rain. And he says, he says there's another difference. Like the Hafla says in the end of Tractate Kedusha. The Hafla, one of the great commentaries of the Talmud of Tractate Kedusha. He says, Alma Sha'amar. It says over there that the Talmud there is talking about that the Talmud says, why should a person go out for a livelihood? Why? Because God provides for the animals. The animals, you ever see an animal go out to a job? You ever see an animal need to live in a house? Says the Tana, says the sage in the Mishnah, and I know that the animals were created for the man is the pinnacle of creation. Everything is creation is here to be used for us, that we should use it to elevate it to come close to God. So why don't I? So it's a kal v'chomer. It's all the more. So I should get my livelihood and sustenance without working. I'm here because the animals are here to serve me, and I am here to serve my Creator. So so of course I should get. If the animals are getting it, and they're only here for me, then certainly I should get it without having to work. Says the Tana, but we Ela Shahor Rossi, my side. I made bad my actions, right? He's talking about first man, Adam Arishon, Adam, he's the sin of the Eitz Hadas, the Kapachtes Parnasasi, and I withheld my Parnasa. Now it's going to be difficult. I messed up. I blew it. Now God says, okay, you'll get your Parnasa, you'll get your livelihood, but now you're going to have to work for it. Now it's going to be hard. But really, it should be that I shouldn't have to. Says the Chassam Sofer, you have to realize that the creations in the world desire that humankind benefits from them. Through us using what God created in this world, we elevate it by using it for the divine, by using it for service of God. The portions of the world can be split up, everything in the world can be split up into 4 different categories. Domain, inanimate objects. Tomeach, things that sprout. Medaber chai, right? And things that are alive, and human beings that speak. Inanimate objects get elevation because things grow from it. So let's say the dirt's inanimate. And through things growing from it, so it reaches its purpose. It reaches an elevation. Why God created it. And then the things that are growing, things that grow through the living, either animals or people, it's elevated. And then the animals through a human being eating the animal. It's elevated if they do the will of God. But when we mess up our actions, we don't elevate it, we don't use it for good, things in this world, through man, so then the kapachtes parnasasi. So he says, then the creation of the world is not so forthcoming to wanting to that we should partake in it. So that's right. It's not as forthcoming. We could be reminded of Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, when he was fleeing, and when his parents said to go find a mate, he left Haron and he went to Beersheba, and he encountered the Harabayas, the place of the Temple Mount, and he went to sleep there. And he says, I didn't realize, right, this is a holy place. He went to sleep, and says the sages, it says in that he took stones, and then later it says the stone. And says the Medrash that Jacob, who has reached the highest levels of that a human being could reach, so the stones joined in, the stones inanimmately, and we have to understand exactly what that means. Stones can't speak or whatever, but it means the mazel either of the stones on a certain level. It means the stones said, Allah yaniach rosha tzadik roshi. The stones, as if wanted that Jacob should lay down to sleep on them. This Jacob, here's Jacob. He's The whole purpose why God created everything is that we should come close to Him. And here you have Jacob. He is the ultimate, the ultimate person that does it. He's the Bechir Sheva Avos. He's the forefathers. He's the third one, and the Jewish people are going to come from him. Here is where it's all at. So they all wanted him, so they all joined together. So it's a similar idea. When we do what we're supposed to in this world, so then the world that we live in, as if to say, wants that we should benefit from it, because we are really we're elevating everything. When we don't do what we're supposed to, so then the land's not as forthcoming. So then the Tomeach Nadaber, right, the Chai, not as forthcoming. So it finishes the Chassam Sofer. It says, "V'hine, behold, Parshas Zu Shel in Bechukotai Ma'ir Ba'osei Ritzono." This portion is talking about the high level when we're doing the will of God. Aval Parshas B'Hayim Shemoah, but the portion of it will be your that rain will come and you'll bring in your grain. It doesn't say your rain over there is going to be yours, but the grain you'll bring in. So the second portion of the Shema is a lower level. As it says in Reish Paraketz and Revarchim, as the tractate in Brachos, we can't get into it right now. It's not enough time, but that is talking about the Ein Osin. We're not doing the will of the Creator. And they say on the bottom, it doesn't mean literally. Rabbi Yochanan Matar B'Shvil Yachid. I'm sorry. Gemara Shom Zman She Yisrael Oisim Rishon Shom Makom Malach Nasas Aydei Atzmon Shenemar V'Yasaf V'Gunecha. When you're not doing the will of the Creator, so you have to deal with the grains. It's not going to be as easy. You're going to have to go out into the field. If we're on a higher level, like our Torah portion, so then it will be taken care of. I will make sure it's taken care of for you. Let's continue over here. He says this is all. So everything is very precise, the wording of the verse. But Osin, when we're doing the will of the Creator, the highest level, the verse says, your rain is going to come. It's going to come in your merit, not by nature. And the produce is going to give. The land is going to want to give it to you. The period, and the trees are going to want to give their fruit. However, Hassam over there in Bahayim Shemoah, here he changed a little bit. He says you're not doing. It's not on the highest level. It doesn't mean you're not doing your will at all, because then that could, God forbid, lead to not getting any rain at all, droughts or very, very even more difficulties. So you're getting blessing over there, but it means not on the same level. Tosa says over there, you're doing God's will, but Tosa says over there, ain't tzaddikim gemura. We know that there's a concept of a tzaddik, a righteous person. It means that majority of his actions are virtuous, right? How he treats others and how his relationship to him and God, right? And that's a tzaddik. But then there's another level called the tzaddik yisod olam. It means or tzaddik gomer. It means we're talking about the heavy hitters, the great rabbis and rebbes and great sages that lived throughout the generations, and they are, in their merit, that's a very high level that they're on. They're a completely righteous person, not just someone who gravitates towards doing good deeds, but someone who's immersed completely in entirety from morning to night in holiness and in that's tzaddik gomer. So our verse where the rain belongs to you, the world wants to give you the rain because you're like that level of Jacob, right? So then there, it's the Torah calls it your rain. It's they're mishtokek. They desire, they yearn to give it to you, the world, because you're elevating it. However, in Shema, in the second chapter, it's not tzaddik gomer. You're doing God's will, but not to the same level. So you'll get blessing. God is still going to take care of you, but it's not yours, and therefore in Shema it says Lechin, says the Chassam Sofer, Amar v'yichis hageshem l'teva. There in the second chapter of Shema, it doesn't say your rain; it says nature's rain. Hainu hanhag hativis, meaning God will give you blessing, but through natural means. V'nasati mitar artzachem, God will bring the rain of their lands. Miyuchis hageshem la'aretz. There, when we're not the tzaddik yisod olam, when we're doing God's, we're righteous, but not to the same level. then there the rain is associated with the land. The fruit is called your grain. Right? Because it's not the same level. They're not. It's not as forthcoming. It's the lands. It's the lands. That's the idea of Chassam Sofer says. So we see. What do we see over here? We see there are a lot of levels. There are many levels, and the way how we act that will determine how God acts to us. The higher the level, the right, then the less we're going to have to be involved in this world. The lower the level, the more the God will still help us. God will still be good to us, but it's going to be more through natural means. It's not going to be the same level. They're level and levels, and that's the idea which we have. The Chassam Sofer says over here. Okay, let's continue now to another thought over here. Right, and we see this throughout the Rashi's commentary over here again. Right, if you just look throughout the blessings over here, this is the highest level. I will cause wild beasts to withdraw from the land. Right, there's not going to be there'll be no calamities with animals. People are not going to die from animals. That's above nature. The natural instinct of a law too close in is to attack, look at you as food. But the Jewish people are on such a level over here, the animals are going to withdraw. And a sword will not cross your land. Says Rashi. Of course it means, it doesn't have to even say that foreign, you're not going to come to war. Of course you're not going to come to war. You're at the highest level here. God's going to make sure enemies can't touch you. You're invincible, so to speak, in the sense of war. Ella, what does it mean? Even to cross. Derech Artechem. A nation is going to say to Israel, listen, we're not fighting you, the Jewish people, you're good, but we need to go through your land. Right? It says Rashi, Medina, Limedina, from one country to another. We need to just pass through your land. So that's not so gishmak, as they say, right? That's not such a great thing, oh yeah, the tanks are coming through your land, and makes people nervous, army, infantry coming through. Says the Torah, that's not going to happen. You're not going to have any issues at all. And here again, from among you, you will pursue 100, and from 100 among you, you'll pursue 10,000. Right? So that's not natural means. Right? 5 is going to pursue 100 men, 100 enemies. That's clearly not what that's miraculous. And then 100 will pursue 10,000. And Rashi points out over here that in number 8, in the second by the little box there, 5 from among you will pursue 100, and 100 from among you will pursue 10,000. Rashi says that calculation is not correct. It should have been, right, says Rashi, is this the calculation? It should have said, and 100 from among you, from your dofu, 2,000. It should be, if it's right, if it's 5 to 100, so then the calculation should be 100 to 2,000. But over here it says 100 to 10,000. Says Rashi, you're right. We have a great concept over here. Ella. You cannot compare. A few people that are performing the commandments of the Torah, if you have many people perform the commandments of the Torah, then it becomes greater and greater and greater. It's not, it just bursts forth, right? And that's the next Rashi. Right, the people are going to fall. Your enemies will fall. They will fall before you. It's not the way of, in an unnatural manner, not the way of the land. Again, this is talking about very high level. They're doing everything to that degree. Okay, I want to focus a little bit on a very famous verse in the curses. Right, this is Chav Vav Chav Ches. So let's see it first in the portion. right? And the curses begin in verse 14 over here. If you will not listen to me and you will not perform all these commandments. And Rashi goes through, we can't go through it now, but Rashi goes through the 7 sins that, right, it starts from not being involved in Torah study, and one thing leads to another. Avera goreres avera, it says in Ethics of Our Father, that when a person starts getting into the habit of doing sins, so then it causes other sins, and it has a snowball effect. Right? You will consider my statutes revolting, you reject my ordinances, then I too will do this. I will sign over you panic, the wasting away, right? Okay. And Rashi goes through all these all the curses. Okay, so verse number 25. Despite all these, you will not be chastised to me. After all the suffering and pain, right? The suffering is supposed to lead us, turn us to mend our ways. And if despite this you will not be chastised to me, and you will behave casually with me. You're going to behave casually with me. Mikra, you'll say, oh, it happened to have been. You're not getting the message that it's coming from God. You're saying it's mikra. Keri is the language of mikra, that it's happenstance. Happened to have been. A person doesn't change if they view things in a casual way. If we view things as, oh, this all it happens to everyone, so then a person will live a life of happenstance, then it's not going to motivate him to change. Says God, says the Torah, very scary. God says, I too will behave you with casualness. People are going to, where is God? Where is God? Right? It seems like right? God says, well, if you act towards me in a casual manner, that everything's happenstance, I will lead you down a path that everything seems to be happenstance. Now, there's a very fascinating and famous Rambam. Now, here we turn to Tiferes Shimshon, Reb Shimshon Pinkus. Reb Pinkus says that the Rambam writes in the beginning of the laws of fast days, mitzvahs aseh min Torah. And again, follow along with me. Unfortunately, again, I don't have, there is no translation for this work. So I will translate it. A rough translation, a loose translation, I should say. Mitzvah aseh min Torah lizak la'ariyah b'chatzotzos. Says the Rambam in the beginning of the laws of fast days. There's a mitzvah, the positive commandment from the Torah to cry out to God when things go south, when things are going bad for the Jewish people. The chatzotzos, with trumpets in the times of the temple. Al kol tzara, shetav al tzibor, and any affliction, any pain that comes on the congregation, on the Jewish people. Shinamers, it says, in Parshas Bechukotai, in Numbers, it says, right, when pain comes to you, that you blow trumpets, and it means motivating us to pray. And in Halacha Gimel, says Reb Pinkus, so Shamba Halacha Gimel, in the third Halacha of Maimonides, Custom writes, Avo im lo yizaku. Person had the calamities, God forbid, befall the Jewish people. And if our response is not, that we do not cry out, v'lo yariu, we don't call out to God. Ela yomru. What do we say? Davar zeh minhag ha'olam. Oh, this happens all the time. This is the way of the world. No, things happen, but nikris, and this pain, it's happenstance. It happens. Areza derech achzari says this is the way of cruelty. This is cruel, says Maimonides. It causes you to stay attached to your bad ways. The toast of atzar, and it's going to increase. Other bad things are going to come one after the other. This is what it means in the Torah, in our portion. If you go with me, says God, with happenstance, just happens to be, it doesn't motivate you to change, to turn to God, to realize God is bringing this. God, whether it's a natural occurrence, God is in control of nature, or whether it's not a natural human being. Why did God allow that to happen to me? Why did God allow this person to harm me? No one can harm me if God doesn't allow it. He has a free will to decide to harm me, but he doesn't necessarily, just because he has a free will and tries to harm me, doesn't mean he's going to. It could be he'll slip at the last second. Could be, many things could happen. It could be a person could run away and he'll be saved. He'll get nervous that someone will come at the last second and save, right? A lot of things can happen. So, but if something bad happened, why did why did God allow it? Why did God, right? Why did it happen? Kolomar means to say she'evo aleichem tzara kadesha toshuvu. Says Maimonides, God is bringing it in order, this sorrow in order that we should repent. Then Tomru, if we say shehu carry that this has happened since Osef lachem Hamas also carry, then the God. So the Maimonides is explaining the verse. God is going to go with us with a wrath of happenstance because we're not getting the message. Tzarech beer, says Rabbi Pincus of blessed memory. Kavanas Rambam. We have to understand, what does the Rambam mean over here? He writes, Hareza derech havzaros. If God sends us messages and we just oh, it happens. We don't take it to heart. He calls that cruelty. Where's the cruelty exactly? Says Rabbi Pincus. Cruelty is not exactly the word that we would pick. We would say that they're denying that God is running things. They're not right. They're not cruelty. Cruelty is you're cruel to other people. A person could be cruel to animals. Right. Cruelty over here in this context doesn't seem to fit. So says Rapinkus, a lot of people explain this Maimonides this way. Says Rapinkus, a lot of people explain this Maimonides that when he says it's cruelty, it means they're being cruel on themselves. Right? If you don't get the message, if God sends an alarm clock that's 30 decibels and you're still not waking up, he's gonna have to. It's gonna be 50 decibels. It's gonna be 60 decibels. How many decibels to wake you up? It's gonna be louder and louder, hard, more difficult. So you're being cruel to yourself. You don't get the message right away. God's gonna have to keep sending things to get you to mend your ways. But so the Rambam says, Rapinkus, it can't be that's really what it means because in Kain Lama Dafka Kan Yesh Bazak Zaris Al Atzman. Why is it on yourself? Hare Al Kolchet Bo Onesh Chomer. It says on any time we sin, it's not good for us. We create a kateger. Kateger is a prosecuting angel. We're Kona, we acquire. There are a lot of acquisitions that we have in this world. It says the Mishnah in the 4th chapter in Ethics of Our Fathers. A person does a mitzvah, he's acquiring for himself in this world. He's purchasing for himself a good deed. He's purchasing himself an angel, a malach, that will be there for him as merit. He's adding merit to himself. It's like a bank account. He's depositing. When we do a mitzvah, we're depositing and we acquire. When we do something wrong, we acquire something negative. So by all sins, you could say, or by all missteps, you could say is cruelty on ourselves. And furthermore, a person doesn't cause knowingly, willingly pain on oneself. A person tries to guard himself very well. It means over here that the Rambam means that you're like falling into a sleep. Why is that a cruelty? You're missing the boat. You're not getting the message. But why is that a cruelty? So he says like this: Venira, it appears. Maimonides over here when he says that things bad that are happening to the Jewish people, and we don't turn to God with prayer and with teshuvah, with repentance. It's not talking about a person here is kofar. He denies God's existence. He doesn't recognize there's a creator. If so, he's not a cruel person. He just doesn't realize that there's God. So we must say then, he knows that there's a creator. But he thinks it's not that the calamities that are befalling him are not coming from God. This is how the world works. He believes in God, but he doesn't realize that hashgacha pratis, in divine providence. So when something bad happens, God is allowing that to happen. The Ramchal says that in so many words. The Derech Hashem. The Ramchal says, how does bad things happen? God just causes a hester upon him. He removes his countenance. And when he removes his countenance, that vacuum causes the negativity to come and the difficulty to come. So through that hester upon him, through that concealment, comes the difficulty. But God is concealing his presence. God is causing that vacuum to come about, so then the bad could come in. Right? So he thinks that it's just, there's a lot of happenstance in the world. I believe in God, but this is happenstance. Al Zamaram. So that's what Maimonides is talking about. Shemidazu. So he says this character trait, lahashir es olam b'lemikroim, that he leaves to the world happenstance. He achzarius shein kamo. There's no other cruelty like it. Lebore olam moli sakonis lizurges kulam b'lemikro. It's livra olam, that God created a world moli sakonis, full of dangers. Lizurges kulam b'lemikra. Again, so we're talking about a guy who believes in God, but he thinks when bad things happen, it's just, oh, this happens to be. Says Rapinkus, you're turning God into a very cruel person, right? You're turning God. So what happened? Let me get this straight. Livra Olam, he created a world, Mali Sakanos, full of dangers. Lizrak es Kulam Lamikra, and God's throwing us in there. He's throwing us in the cage with the lion. It's like the gladiators. Okay, go there, fight the lion. Good luck. You know, that's cruel. Imagine you take 1,000 people, the Gershon Lasof Yar, and you throw them into a forest. Malachayos truthless, full of wild animals. Mebli Lasei Salem Shmira. You don't give them any weapons. Basher Yitrof can be a mikra. Anyone who gets torn apart, anyone who gets killed by the animals, that's what happens. That's what you think God did in this world? So when cruel things happen, you think God is just throwing you in a forest, to fend for yourself? You're making God very cruel. So he's saying the cruelty of Maimonides is that you're turning God into cruel. If you don't realize that this is purposeful, everything in the world is coming from God, and this is a purposeful thing. We don't understand it, but we know that at the end of the day, the bottom line means we have to do teshuvah, we have to be better. Let's just finish the piece. I know it's after 8 o'clock. You're forced to say that the person who thinks is yesh, but he himself has this need. Because he himself has this feeling, so then he pulls it on others. He's saying a deep thing over here. If you wouldn't feel this way, to God, all the more so to God, who's merciful and complete. Right, a person wouldn't have this attitude. Let's just finish over here. So, Bilam. This is similar to what Bilam did. He was nefesh rechava. Bilam, the wicked Bilam, who gave advice. He tried to curse the Jews, right? And he gave advice to Moab that the God hates promiscuity. So allow your daughters to be promiscuous and serve idols with the Jewish people, right? So Malihu Atzmaya about Taiba, because Bilam himself was full of these desires of idolatry and immorality. So too over here. So let's just finish this. A person who has mercy, Yodea, he knows Shaolam who Mali Rachaman. He knows the world is full of God's. He sees God's mercy throughout his life, every breath, and many times God saved us. We almost got into an accident or something else. God was there for us, and we were saved. God didn't just throw us into a forest that things should just happen. And if a bad thing happens to us, it's coming with an aim and for a purpose. In order to place in our hearts in order for us to fix our ways and our actions and our ways. So he's basically saying that we're cruel because we're saying God is cruel, and because we don't recognize that this must be purposeful. If we look at God like God is just throwing us in there and good luck, fend for yourself, so we're really cruel, because why are you looking through that lens, right? It must be you're cruel, and for you to be cruel. So, this is how it works, right? But if a person realizes God is our Father in heaven, he's merciful. So when calamities befall, it's for a higher purpose. It's for a greater purpose. So he says that's what the Achzaris is over here. Okay, there's one other piece I wanted to see, but we don't have any more time. So we're going to hold it over here.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good shot.